Hello everyone, this is Dalster and welcome to another episode review for Dark Side the Ring. And in this episode it talks about Nick Gage. It has been a long time since watching this episode, so I will go over it first and then explain my thoughts at the end. From the episode title, Nick Gage seems to be one of those wrestlers who is very violent. Plus, ultra-violence is about excessive or extreme violence, as I heard about it in the movie called A Clockwork Orange. Just to give out a disclaimer, if you end up watching the episode, there is a lot of blood shown, and Nick using a pizza slicer on someone. So if you do not like blood or open wounds, this episode might be triggering for you. I'm going to talk about Nick's childhood first, since this episode was a little unorganized. Nick grew up in National Park, New Jersey, and wanted to be a wrestler when he was 9. The city of National Park in the 80s was a low-income area, as Nick was raised by a single mother, who he says is similar to Patty Duke's. He was very close to his mom, but she sadly got cancer when Nick was an adult. What made Nick get into wrestling was watching Saturday Main Event with his dad as a kid, which Nick said in the episode that his dad regrets it because of the career path Nick chose as he got older. He enjoyed watching wrestling so much that he started doing extreme wrestling in the backyard. Nick would have barbed wire in his backyard matches, as he was influenced by the Cactus Jack vs. Terry Funk Extreme match from Japan. Once he started wrestling, Nick was known to be an ultra-violent person who used glass, barbed wire, tables, and would spear or throw himself with his opponents in tall buildings. This made him one of the biggest wrestlers in death matches. His older brother Chris, who was known as Justice Payne, would work with Nick in some of his matches. In one death match, Nick faced Jon Moxley, who was formerly known as Dean Ambrose from WWE. During the match, Nick got a pizza cutter and cut John's teeth, as well as almost cutting his tongue off. Nick cut John with the pizza cutter so that he would get a chance to win the CZN Championship from the Combat Zone Wrestling promotion. John said while being interviewed in the episode that he gets excited doing death matches even if it costs him half of his blood from his body. I'm not sure if he won the title from Moxley, but he did win the title 4 times at CZN. Eventually, Nick participated in a deathmatch tournament at Delaware. In the finals, he faced German wrestler Thumbtack Jack and did a raging promo at Jack. There were tall light tubes surrounding the ring, and Nick was thrown to them while wrestling Jack, and they sounded like shattered glass. Blood quickly bursted out of Nick's arm, and he quickly gets treated by the nurses. The nurses taped him up, but Nick wanted to go back to the match, even if it meant dying. A helicopter came in and flew Nick to the hospital. He almost died as he had a flat line for 7 minutes. Nick did not seem to care, as he said in the episode that he was willing to die in the ring. His high school girlfriend, Sandra, would be front and center in the crowd for Nick's matches. In one match, Nick lit himself on fire and tried to do the stop, drop, and roll drill, but was not able to, as the workers in GCW put out the fire with the fire hydrants. Although Nick was severely burned, he was able to continue and finish the match. In order to help ease his pain, Nick would pop pills. One day he asked his doctor if he could get 30 pills, and the doctor said yes, as Nick started taking more pills. Nick stopped taking OxyContin as it was expensive to get, so he got heroin as it was cheaper to get from the streets. He would also use his income that he got from wrestling and buy drugs. Nick was never a drug addict until he started using prescription drugs, so that he could treat the pain he got from wrestling. His addiction caused a rift between him and his brother Chris. When they had a match, Chris took his anger on Nick and slapped him. Chris almost broke Nick's shoulder, which caused Chris to have a fallout with Nick for many years. Days later, Nick lost his mom to cancer, which caused him to sink deeper into addiction. His father passed away soon after, and Nick ended up becoming homeless. He moved to his girlfriend Sandra's mom's house, but did not pay anything, nor the bills during his time there, so Sandra's mom ended up kicking Nick and Sandra out of the house. Nick and Sandra slept at Brett's house, but they soon got kicked out. Frustrated, Nick robbed a bank by writing a note to the worker of the bank telling them to give him money because he had a gun. Nick then went to Brett's house and showed Brett the money that he had stolen from a drug dealer instead of telling him the truth that he had stolen it from a bank. The cameras, however, were able to get Nick's face, and Nick said in the interview that he looked good in the pictures, even though he was in trouble during that time. Nick's face ended up being in the newspaper soon after he had robbed the bank, so he ended up escaping to Atlantic City and spent the money that he had stolen. He took his girlfriend Sandra with him as they spent time having fun at a casino before Nick was going to turn himself in. It took Nick 8 to 9 days to turn himself in, and so he went to Brett. As he was with Brett, he took him to get a Whopper at Burger King, as it was his last meal before he had turned himself in. Nick pleaded second degree in bank robbery and was sentenced to 5 years in New Jersey State Prison. He went to a gang block at the prison, but was never visited by Chris, as Nick would visit Chris back when he was in jail, which got Nick upset. Fans sent masses of mail to Nick when he was in jail, saying to keep his head up and to take care of himself. It was his fans' support that got Nick to survive in jail and work out in order to get better for himself and his fans. Instead of serving the whole 5 years, Nick got out early on March 31st, 2015. Nick returned to CZW and was in his best shape as he looked more muscular and lean than before. Brett got Nick in a deathmatch tournament called the Nick Gage Invitation. Unfortunately, Nick fell back into bad habits and was arrested again, causing Brett to be upset with Nick. He went back to jail for almost 2 years, and Game Changer Wrestling, GCW, continued without him. But they did wait for Nick's return. As he was in jail again, his popularity had grown. His fan base was growing worldwide, so Nick became the leader of the Murder Kill Gang, which is something that is close to his heart, as they call it a cult. Hopefully it's not an actual cult. Nick also said that he represents the Eastern Blockade Club, which is a tag team. Even after everything and being gone for a while due to prison, Nick's fans always welcomed him back. Days after he returned, Nick had a match against David Arquette, who once held the WCW title when WCW was still active. The audience hated the idea, since some of them were still mad at David for having the WCW title 2 decades ago, because they felt that he did not deserve it and that he is an actor. They wrestled in a death match at GCW, but David did not know who Nick really was before doing the match. Nick had told David at a dinner that David was going to bleed in this match. David also had told Nick not to cut him deep, as David was an actor. Nick said that he was going to kick David's behind. In the match, Nick spat on David and hit him while he was getting into character. Nick gave everything he got to David and sliced him with a pizza cutter. He puts a pizza cutter in David's mouth and smashes a light tube on David's head. In fact, Nick almost stabbed David in the throat. When you watch the clip in this episode, Arquette looked as though he was gurgling his blood once he was cut in the match. Gage then beats David with a judo throw and tells him to stay down or that he would get hurt even more, causing Nick to win the match. Nick said that David was a crybaby after the match and never talked to him after that. The match soon went viral, and Nick's fan base had increasingly grown even more worldwide. Days later, Nick received news that his brother Chris had died after jumping off a bridge. What happened to Chris was that he stole a car because the police tried to catch him, but he ended up jumping off a bridge so that he would not get arrested. Before his death, Chris had substance issues as well as mental issues. Brett said that Chris felt as though someone was coming after him before he had taken his life. The bridge that Chris had jumped off was close to Nick's house. Nick would go to the bridge every day and reminisce on his brother. He said that he would rather die in a good way and not the way that Chris did. John said in the episode that Vince McMahon would want to have a wrestler who has a close connection with their fans, such as Nick. Nick really loves his fans, as they motivated him to keep going and continue to do what he loves. At the end of the episode, we see Nick winning a match as he pays tribute to his brother and points his finger up to acknowledge him. Interviewers for this episode are Nick Gage, John Moxley, Brett Lauderdale, owner of Game Changer Wrestling, Sandra Culbertson, Nick's girlfriend, and David Arquette. I give this episode an 8 out of 10, as it was interesting around the middle of the episode, but it was a little unorganized, as they mentioned Nick's matches first, and then his past afterwards. He's definitely the kind of guy who's not afraid to say what he wants. It was an okay episode, and it showed how Nick cares a lot about his fans. Pretty sad that his brother died the way he did. Nick does seem happy and calm after everything that he went through. Some facts about Nick is that his real name is Nicholas William Wilson, and he was born on September 22nd, 1980. Nick has won 3 deathmatch tournaments, such as the CZW Tournament of Death, the IWA Mid-South King of the Deathmatch, and the GCW Tournament of Survival. He also watched NWA in his childhood but thought of WWE as corny. Nick almost gave up watching wrestling until ECW got him into it again and inspired him to do backyard wrestling. As a kid, he idolized NFL player Lawrence Taylor. In 2021, Nick made a one-time appearance in AEW but lost to Chris Jericho. As of today, Nick is a Christian and prays occasionally. In 2005, Nick was arrested for possession of stolen property. He pleaded guilty and paid a fine of $250 with court costs included. Sports Illustrated ranked Nick number 10 on the top 10 wrestlers in 2019. Pro Wrestling Illustrated voted Nick Independent Wrestler of the Year in 2021 and was ranked 61 out of 500 wrestlers for singles wrestlers that year. Other than GCW and CZW, Nick was also in Absolute Intense Wrestling, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Horror Slam Wrestling, IPW Hardcore Wrestling, Independent Wrestling Associate Mid-South, Insane Championship Wrestling, Jersey All Pro Wrestling, and On Point Wrestling. In 2022, at GCW, Nick defeated Jon Moxley for the GCW World Championship for the third time in a title versus career match. As of today, Nick is currently injured and hasn't been in GCW for a while, but his status is unknown as of this year. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and take care of yourself and everyone around you and your mental health, and I will do the same. Bye guys.